Today on the show, A Tale of Two Settlements. Welcome to Lore Party, the show that explores the stories, characters, and universes behind some of our favorite video games. I'm Caleb.
And I'm Jaden.
And today we're talking about Good Neighbor and Diamond City, two of the most populated cities in Fallout 4.
Yes, the brothers in Boston.
The brothers in Boston. I actually really like that nickname for them. Make it canon. So, Diamond City is the most populated city in Fallout 4, the game. And in a lot of ways, it is one of the most important cities lore-wise. Speaking for myself, whenever I have friends who play the game, one of the first pieces of advice I give them when they're just starting out is to actually follow the story missions straight forward until they get to Diamond City, and then start doing the side quests, because Diamond City is where all the interesting world building and side quests tends to start.
It's also the place that I would say most closely resembles the world that was before, which, you know, from a lore perspective, is probably the best place to start for your character, because your character is, you know, fresh out of, you know, a nuclear holocaust. He just experienced the old world, and now he's trying to find some sense of normalcy for himself.
Exactly, and it's definitely one of the really interesting parts of it, is it shows a lot of what the Fallout universe can be. It's a city built inside the Boston Red Sox Stadium, so it's kind of a something new built on the ruins of something old. It's surprisingly interesting, but it stands in stark contrast to another major settlement in the game, which is one that you'll also run into on the main quest, a city called Good Neighbor.
Ah, yes, Good Neighbor. This one is more of a dark and twisted version that more accurately reflects the world that you find yourself in. You know, it's a dirtier city. It's got a lot of, you know, grittier characters. I mean, the first thing that happens to you when you walk into the city is you get mugged, essentially.
I think that's what's really interesting about the city, though, because, yes, on the one hand, you do get mugged, but then what immediately happens is someone else walks up to you and stabs the guy trying to mug you. And I think right there, that might be a Good Neighbor in a nutshell. This is a city of people who will stab the guy trying to mug you.
Which I think is funny, too, because, you know, the guy doing the stabbing could easily be the guy who was, you know, robbing you 10 minutes beforehand, but he just felt like being the noble one at the time.
The thing that, in my mind, makes these cities really interesting is kind of the interconnectedness of them. If you actually go into their backstories and their original histories, a lot of the residents of Good Neighbor are actually outcasts from the city of Diamond City.
Which is kind of cool, because it's a newer twist on what would normally happen. You know, to criminals in the Fallout universe, they just turn into raiders normally. But these guys decided, no, we liked the life in a city, so we want to try to make a city our own, even if we're not allowed back in the real city.
That's what makes it really interesting, though, because, like, on top of that, a lot of the settlers in Good Neighbor are actually ghouls that were cast out of Diamond City when the Mayor McDonough cast the ghouls out of Diamond City, cast all the ghouls in Diamond City out of the city, which is especially interesting considering that the current neighbor of Good Neighbor, by the time you go visit there, is none other than John McDonough, the Mayor McDonough of Diamond City's brother.
Which is very interesting, too, because, you know, he is a ghoul, which means his own brother cast him out.
Well, he wasn't actually originally a ghoul when he was cast out.
That's true.
He became a ghoul later after being cast out.
But the mayor never rescinded the policy.
I mean, it definitely adds a thing, is that he's forbidden from the city that his brother governs. John McDonough ended up changing his name to John Hancock, naming him after the famous John Hancock of history, and became the mayor of Good Neighbor in its present form. And the way he leads it and governs it is very much influenced by what he saw his brother doing in the city he was in control of.
He's definitely a lot more lenient than his brother is. I mean, his brother goes so far as, when you first encounter Piper in the game, basically just tries to keep Piper on the streets because he's decided he doesn't want to deal with her anymore. Whereas I feel like John Hancock, you know, he'd kill you, but he would never stop you from at least trying to go back to your house.
It's actually an interesting plot twist later in the game. We find out that Mayor McDonough is actually himself a synth.
He became the very thing he swore to destroy.
It's fuzzy at what point Mayor McDonough actually became a synth in Diamond City. So it's fully possible that it was the synth who was casting other synths and ghouls out in order to make it easier for the Institute to be able to retrieve them.
Absolutely. A weaker Diamond City would be even easier target for the Institute's influences. And I think that would make the most sense to me, because a lot of the people that got kicked out were a lot of the better fighters in Diamond City. And that's very evident in the fact that Good Neighbor is still standing. I mean, their population is a lot smaller than Diamond City, but they've still managed to, survive all the super mutants, incursions from the Institute, possible battles with, maybe the Brotherhood at some point or another. It just shows you that, like, their plan was to try to, if I was the Institute, get rid of all the good fighters, send them scattered across the wasteland, and then, just that makes it easier for them to pick them off. But then all of a sudden, they got together and said, hey, we want to build a city together. And then the Institute, instead of having one town to deal with, they have two towns they have to now deal with.
It's definitely really interesting, because that really does tie into the idea that both of these cities deal with a lot of the same challenges, from the Institute to these other things, but they do so from incredibly different worldviews and perspectives. So Diamond City, in a lot of ways, built heavily on the idea of protection through its institutions and structures. It's literally a city built around a wall. It's heavily fortified. It has a city guard. It has social hierarchies. It has a press. It has a government. It very much has a very social structure. It very much has a system and a structure keeping it safe. Compare this to Good Neighbor, which is focused much more on the idea of protection through a community itself. It forgoes a lot of those more traditional structures, a lot of the buildings, the walls, the guards, and much more on keeping themselves and each other as individuals safe. And even though it's a lot smaller and doesn't have a lot of the resources and population that Diamond City itself has, it's still very much a powerful force in the Commonwealth.
I would agree. It's more of in terms of firepower, it's a more quality than quantity. I mean, they're a smaller town, but they definitely have, if you're strong enough to survive out in the wasteland and then be welcomed into this town, you definitely pack a punch.
It also goes to show the different approaches you can take as far as the different challenges in the wasteland, because Diamond City focuses a lot on trying to build the world as it once was, trying to recreate it as much as possible, trying to rebuild. Whereas Good Neighbor is a lot more focused on surviving the world that is. They don't care to improve it. They don't care about the world that was.
Who cares about a haircut? I got to figure out how to feed my family.
Not even your family. You got to figure out how to feed yourself. To their credit, they are very focused on the world as it is and don't hold any illusions on the state of where they are and what survival means.
I was going to say, I think the whole major difference between Good Neighbor and Diamond City is that, Diamond City is trying to thrive, whereas Good Neighbor is just trying to survive.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting way to think about it. The success with which Diamond City is thriving, I think, is one that could be up for debate. But I think that as far as their long-term goals as groups of citizens go, that's a interesting perspective. I think the other thing to keep in mind is that they are facing the same challenges, and they're equipped to face these challenges in different and interesting ways. So, Jaden, let's compare for a second. Between Diamond City and Good Neighbor, who do you think is more equipped to take on the Institute?
See, that is a very interesting question, and I think the most obvious answer is not Diamond City, for the fact that their own leadership was infiltrated by a synth. It's very, very quickly their world and structure has fallen apart. People don't often realize this, but our society basically functions the way it does because the town next door is the exact same thing. Our entire world is basically the exact same way in terms of functionality, in our modern society. And so if you are suddenly, taking that and dropping it in the middle of, 18th century, backfields, people aren't going to react the same way to your rules and structures. Things are different. And the same if you're, dropping someone into a nuclear wasteland, people are going to the people of Diamond City are going to complain. They're going to be upset. If the water runs out, they're not going to know what to do. Whereas I feel like with Good Neighbor, they have to work together to survive, and they know that. That's the biggest thing, is that the people of Good Neighbor don't really care about the extra things in life. They know they have to focus on getting the things they need in life.
To a degree, I would agree with you. I think when it comes to certain types of external threats, I think that Diamond City is not as well equipped as Good Neighbor, as far as when it comes to things like the Institute, as far as when it comes to things like hostile criminals, like...
Oh, I definitely agree with you on that. I think that if a gang of super mutants rolled up onto Diamond City's doorstep, they would be fine. However, the biggest threat in the wasteland at the time is the Institute, and they are masters of the waiting game. They literally waited, underground for years and just thought, you know what? We don't have to take Diamond City tomorrow. We'll send in 2 more synths tomorrow. And then by the end of it, there's going to be like 3 people left who are like, what the hell happened? When all their buddies suddenly have glowing red eyes. Obviously, they don't have that, but you know what I mean.
And that's the thing. So Diamond City is better equipped for certain threats, but not for others. Good Neighbor is better equipped for certain threats, but not for others. So then let's put it in more simple and direct terms then. You and I suddenly wake up and we are faced with the world of Fallout, the world of the Commonwealth. We have to figure out which of the 2 settlements we actually want to live in. Are you going to be applying for residency in Diamond City? Or are you going to be talking to the landlords over in Good Neighbor?
Well, see, this is a question that you got to be real honest with yourself, because, your knee-jerk reaction is go, oh yeah, I'm a tough guy. I'm going to live in Good Neighbor and be a gunslinger and a bounty hunter, da-da-da-da-da. But you got to realize you're going to miss civilization a little bit. That's one of the big things, I think, why the sole survivor finds himself in there so often, is that, that's why a lot of people find themselves there, is that they like the idea of living in the past. They like the safety and comfort that the idea created. So, I mean, while I'd like to pretend that I'd be a big tough guy going and living in Good Neighbor, I feel like I'd probably end up buying an apartment in Diamond City, just because, it's what I'm used to knowing. I have a roof over my head and a police force, That's the thing that a lot of people, that's what brings them to that place. So I'm probably going to end up there, if I'm honest with myself.
That's the thing. Is my first instinct is definitely to say Diamond City, because that sounds like it would be the easy, obvious answer. But I feel like, to me, living in Diamond City and not feeling like I can necessarily trust the people who are in charge, and not knowing whether or not I can trust the different people around me, I feel like that would be something that would get to me really quickly. And I think that personally, I would ultimately end up being someone who would be a lot faster to reach out to Good Neighbor. I don't necessarily think that necessarily anyone who thrives in Good Neighbor necessarily has to be a strong, muscly, tough guy. I mean, look at freaking Kent Connolly. He's a somewhat nerdy ghoul that you meet who's living in there, and Good Neighbor is very much a place that will include the nerds too. And as long as the nerds are willing to help protect what's everyone else's, everyone else will help them protect what's theirs.
I guess you're recovering, but the real question you have to ask yourself is, can you trust the citizens of Good Neighbor? They were all criminals, after all.
I think that's the incorrect way to frame the question. Whether or not you can trust a citizen of Good Neighbor is moot, because you can trust the citizens, plural, of Good Neighbor.
Interesting.
If the individual person I'm talking to stabs me in the back or starts trying to attack me, everyone else is going to attack them. Yes, you know what? In all reality, when I go to Good Neighbor, as soon as I go in, there is probably going to be someone greeting me at the door trying to mug me. But I feel like there is a confidence that as soon as that guy's trying to mug me, someone else is going to walk up, stab him in the gut, and be like, don't pull that shit again. Well, he won't be able to because he's dead.
Yeah. But, it's one of those things. I think it's all about your preference at that point. You just got to wonder, what do you want to sacrifice? Going back to the old world or trying to embrace the new world? And it's really something that, thankfully, none of us have to actually answer.
We'll see.
Well, that about wraps it up. We hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, take a second to rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts. It really helps us grow the show and lets us know we're doing a good job. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.